exciting to see people from Egypt. I think I saw Argentina, and you're welcome to put it on the chat if I miss your country. I saw Algeria. I think it was Portugal. And if not, correct me if I'm wrong, but super happy to have you all here. I know we have different time zones represented. So without further ado, I would love to give it away to our speakers. And thank you again, Lauren and Brenda, for sharing your knowledge with us. This is part of a series. I think this is our third webinar that we've done. Absolutely amazing and just very well received. We are recording it, and we'll be happy to share that recording with you. But feel free to write your questions on the chat as we go through, and we'll be happy to answer them towards the end. Okay, so thank you very much, Lauren and Brenda.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that wonderful introduction. We have been loving this collaboration and working with all of you guys. If this is your first time with us, welcome. If not, this is the third of a 4-part series that we are hoping to expand and continue because the feedback has been lovely. We are with the Center for Literacy and Learning, which is located in New Orleans, Louisiana. We have 2 offices, one in Metairie and one in Baton Rouge, but if you're not a local, you're not going to know where that's at. So we'll just say New Orleans for today. The mission and vision of our organization is to advance literacy and learning through evidence-based practices in the classroom, home, and community. And our vision is that everyone is empowered through literacy. A little bit about our specific program. This is our organization that is our umbrella organization, but we are the Louisiana Statewide Family Engagement Center. And the purpose of our program is to provide support for families and schools to engage in systemic and effective family engagement policies, programs, and activities. So everything that we do is with the end goal in mind of bringing families and schools and student-facing professionals and family-facing professionals together in a partnership and a collaboration that is effective for everyone, where everyone's voices feel heard and empowered. So we'll introduce our team. We have 2 team members who are not here with us today, but they should be with us next time. Sabrina Marsh, she is the director of the Louisiana Statewide Family Engagement Center. And then we have Lakeisha London, who is a family engagement specialist. Both of these ladies come with many, many, many years in the school system as both educators and administrators, working with a wide variety of different populations. We also have myself. My name is Lauren Sisk. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so my background is in mental health. And I have worked in the school setting with many populations, including multilingual learners and diverse learners, which we're going to talk about today. And then I will let Brenda introduce herself and all of her background and wonderful knowledge.
We're in the same room, I'm sorry. So you might hear a little bit of feedback, but good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brenda Molara. I'm also a family engagement specialist for the Louisiana Family Engagement Center. And I have 18 plus years in the school system working as, and everything from parent advisor to an interpreter and translator. So today's presentation, I do have a bit of experience with, and I'll be able to relate my experiences to your experiences in working in the school systems and interpreting and translating also for diverse learners. So we hope you enjoy the presentation today and take some tips from it so you're able to apply it to the work that you do. And I know that the work that you do, Lauren and I, we know it's very important and very needed, and it's very effective when you do it. So thank you very much for everything that you do, not only for our students, but also for those families, those parents that need your support when it comes to help with the school systems.
All righty. Thank you guys for being patient. We have to transition so that we don't have any feedback with us being in the same room. Typically, we are in different locations, but today our entire organization is doing an organization-wide training. So we are together. So today's presentation is Understanding Diverse Learners, Bridging the Gap, Supporting Diverse Learners Through Language, Inclusion, and Collaboration. We encourage participation, whatever you're comfortable with. We will have some interactive elements. We encourage you to drop that in the chat. If you feel comfortable, you may unmute yourself as well and kind of speak about the answers to the questions that we ask, or if you have any feedback or any questions, please know that I'm so sorry. One of our other team members just walked in with our lunch. So please know that this is an interactive session. You don't have to keep yourself on mute the whole time. If you have questions, let us know. We want to make sure that we're addressing the concerns and questions and reflections that you guys have as well. So the objectives for today's presentation: we want to explore the unique challenges and opportunities faced by multilingual students in the classroom, highlighting strategies for providing effective language support while promoting inclusivity, provide an overview of the importance of individualized education plans, or IEPs, and 504 plans for students with disabilities, focusing on how interpreters and translators can facilitate communication and ensure accommodations are appropriately implemented. So how are we going to be the advocate in the room, basically? And to equip interpreters and translators with best practices for working with educators, special education teams, and multilingual families to ensure that diverse learners receive the support they need to succeed academically and socially. So a little bit about understanding who are our diverse learners. When we say this term diverse learners, who are we talking about? Because this word is used interchangeably and with different terminologies depending on where you're from. And so we want to be clear on who we're talking about today. So before we get into that, I have a little personal reflection for you. You can unmute yourself and talk, or you can just drop it in the chat. But consider your role as a translator or interpreter. How can you act as a bridge between educators and diverse learners? And what skills or cultural understandings do you think are most essential in your role? So I'll read that again. How can you act as a bridge between educators and diverse learners? And what skills or cultural understandings do you think are most essential in your role? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to reflect on that. And I would love to see some of those reflections in the chat so we can hear from you. And if you'd like to unmute yourself, you are welcome to do so. So if you'd like to take a picture of this slide and kind of reflect in your own time about the answers to these questions, feel free to do so. I'll leave it up for a few seconds, but to respect everyone's time, we're going to continue moving. I have being the voice of each party, cultural humility, and never assume anything. Always check with both parties. Yes. The interpreter acts as a linguistic and cultural broker, mediator between educators and learners. Absolutely. To provide effective communication to break any barriers between both parties. And for the second part, understanding cultural differences and culture itself and the family dynamics, and also to be a liaison. Absolutely. Thank you guys for these reflections. And then someone said, yeah, never assume anything. Absolutely. You can continue sharing your reflections, but I'm going to continue to move forward so we can respect everyone's time here today. So who are diverse learners? When we say this term, diverse learners encompass individuals who exhibit a wide range of characteristics, backgrounds, and learning needs. This term is commonly used to describe students from various ethnicities, socioeconomic statuses, and cultural backgrounds, as well as those with different learning styles, cognitive abilities, and disabilities or exceptionalities. This includes multilingual learners. So this is anyone which is going to be most of our kids because we're all unique, right? But these are our students that need a little bit of extra support in order to reach equitable learning environments, right? They need a little bit of extra help in order to succeed and have the same opportunities as our common or average students. So feel free to drop in the chat what your mindset or definition or perspective of what a diverse learner is. We'd love to hear that. When you hear the phrase diverse learners, what do you think? Different learning style. Yes, absolutely. Having a different set of skills. Absolutely. We have an agreement. I agree. Different learning styles and experience coming from non-English speaking backgrounds. Yes, absolutely. Students coming from different contexts and environments. Multilingual learners. Yes. Thank you guys so much for these answers. And someone else said varied age and literacy levels. Yes, right? Sometimes this isn't, it can be a variety of things. So it can be language differences. It can be proficiency levels. Maybe I have a harder time in math than other students do, and I need a little extra help to get there, right? It can be our socioeconomic backgrounds, where we're coming from. And so this can definitely encompass a wide variety of our students. So I'm going to let Brenda take over here, and we're going to get into multilingual diverse learners and family-centered language support. So for today, for today's purpose, when we're talking about diverse learners, I want us to use the perspective of our multilingual students, and also the perspective of our multilingual students who have exceptionalities or disabilities, who are going to be in need of those individualized education plans and those 504 plans. So for today's perspective, that's kind of the lens we're coming in today. So I'm going to let Brenda take over.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. And we are going to move on to the challenges that the multilingual families face. And this is something that you all see all the time, right? When you're stepping into the school system to interpret for a family or for a parent or even for a child sometimes. So you have the unfamiliarity with the school systems and the terminology. Okay. Families are coming from different parts of the world. They're coming into the United States. They're coming to a new school system. And it's, especially from Latin America, the school systems are very different, and they're not used to perhaps the public school system in the United States. They're coming from systems that are usually run by the government. If they did attend a public school in their country, it's very different from the public school system in the United States. Or even if they're coming from a private school system in their countries, it's still very different. So that's something that's very, very important. Also, they're dealing with limited access to translated materials. Like I said, I worked in the largest school system in the state of Louisiana for almost 18 years. And when I started back in the late 90s, a lot of the paperwork was not translated. So that's where I would step in to help translate the different types of paperwork that they needed so that the families could understand. And mind you, I'm only bilingual in English and Spanish, but we had parents that were from Vietnamese speaking parents, we had Arabic speaking parents, and there was no paperwork available for them. So that, I mean, now, moving 20, 30 years later, all of that has changed, but back then that was a challenge. And then you're dealing with the cultural misunderstandings or fear of advocacy. They don't understand families or parents that even though they don't speak English, they can still advocate for their child who is needs certain kinds of services in the schools that perhaps need accommodations. They don't understand all that. They don't even know sometimes that those accommodations exist or that that's a possibility. So they don't understand that the school system, the public school system at least, is capable of giving them those things. But if they don't advocate or ask for it, they may never receive it. So for our first example that we were talking about, it's so you can see it in a different perspective. It's, for example, a Spanish-speaking parent receives a letter about their child needing an IEP evaluation, but they don't understand what an IEP is, and that's actually an individualized education program, and they don't know how to request the support. So as a result, they missed critical meetings and services for their child. How many times has that happened? I'm sure that once you are working with a family that has a child on an IEP, they might have told you stories about them not knowing that this was available to them, like I said previously, or even where to begin understanding what an IEP is, okay? Also, limited access to the translated materials. An example is a family that speaks Vietnamese is only receiving school announcements in English. They don't know about the upcoming parent-teacher conferences. They've missed deadlines to apply for a school program, and then also feel left out of the important decisions because of that language barrier. They're not receiving the information that they need in their native language.
And I just want to add real quick as well, that, you know, this can make it look like families are not engaged or don't care about their child's learning, right? They're like, oh, that parent never shows up. That parent's never here for this or that, right? And so it kind of puts a bad outlook on the family. But the truth of the matter is the family's not even understanding the materials that are being sent home. So they don't know what this means. They don't know when the events are, and what the events are and how they can be included in these events. So a lot of times this specific barrier will make it seem like to some of our administrators and our educators that families just don't care or they're not involved. And that's not the reality. And it's a common misconception, especially with our multilingual students, because they're not understanding the material they're getting. If I can't read an event flyer, how am I supposed to know what this event is, when this event is, right? How I can volunteer for this event if I don't even know what it is? I might not even know it's an event flyer, right? And so I think that's something to also keep in mind. And when we're talking about the family engagement lens, advocate for our families and to say, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't want to be here. It's a lack of understanding of what we're holding here at the school. So.
That's right. And then many times, you know, if the parents only knew about it, those would probably be the most active parents that you're going to get, because they're going to be wanting to be so involved in their child's education that once you open that door to them, you're not going to stop seeing them at the schools. But you need to be able to reach out to the parents in their native language at least and let them know what's happening at the school so that they can be participants or active participants. And then finally, cultural misunderstandings or fear of advocacy. An example is in some cultures, questioning a teacher or school administrator is seen as disrespectful. A Somali parent might hesitate to raise concerns about their child being bullied because it worries them that it could be seen as a challenge, you know, that they're challenging the authority or just creating conflict. So we know very well that, for example, again, in Latin America, the teacher and administrators, they have the power, right? We don't, the parents don't have the ability to go in and speak up because it's disrespectful in many of those Latin American countries to do something like that. Maybe that's changed over the years, but before it was no, that it's whatever the teacher said is what went. Here, the parents have the opportunity, again, with our work as family engagement specialists, that's what we do. We want the parents, we want the families, because not, you know, some of these children aren't being raised by their parents, they're being raised by grandparents or other family members. So we call it family engagement. We want them to be in the school system. We want them to participate. We want them there. And we also tell the educators, you need that particular family here to be able to advocate and help their children so that they do succeed in school. So that's the difference. They don't understand that they can advocate for their children. And then talking about, for this particular presentation, we're talking about, or we will be talking about children with disabilities and children that need that extra help, the accommodations. They definitely need that advocate part or piece from their families. So when we can create opportunities through family engagement, we can do, culturally affirming communication practices. We can, again, this comes in with the part of, giving them information in their native language so that we are affirming their culture and we're asking them to participate and be part of the child's education. That's very important. We need to be able to build trusting relationships with the families. We need to let them know that they're very important. Again, here's that family engagement piece. We need to let them know that we want them to participate. Families, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters. We need the family to be part of this. But again, we need to give them an inviting touch to it so that they feel welcomed in the schools. And then partnering with families as co-educators. Again, that family engagement piece where the parents are the first educators of their children, right? They have to be there and educate them on that family piece at home, but then also when their children are now attending school, help them, even if it's in their native language, sit down with them and read to them, help them on, with their homework, ask them, how did you do in school today? What did you do in school today? What is going on? Tell me about your teachers. How do you feel? You need to partner up with that part, with the school and the home, so that we have successful children. And also your job as interpreters and translators, let the families know that they are able to become part of their children's education as co-educators. So some of the strategies to support language access for families is the use of plain language and visuals in documents. So when we're talking about school paperwork, a lot of times the terminology can be very, very confusing. So we need to ask them to maybe use a plain language so that they understand what is happening, and also using visuals. That's very important. Visual cues make it easier to understand certain things. And that's for everybody, right? So when it comes to the school system, using plain language and visuals is very important. Ensuring high quality interpretation at all meetings. I don't have to question that from you all. I know that all of you are professionals in what you do. You understand what it is to be an interpreter and a translator. You need to always be neutral, but also make sure that your work is of high quality, and also, being able to express everything that you need from your client, in this case, the parents, right? To the educators, or sometimes you're hired on behalf of the school. So you need to also do high quality interpretations for the educators. And then encouraging educators to pause and check for understanding. You all do that too. You make sure that what is being relayed, that everything is being understood, and you need to pause for and check for understanding. Okay. So we have some information here, some comments in the chat, right? Okay, Anna, I love that you are including multi-generational families. Yes, engagement should focus on the entire family and not just the parents. And then Lauren says, not using the students as translators is an important message to send to administrators and educators. Yes, yes, I saw that a lot. Unfortunately, they would use big brother, big sister, in the different types of meetings that were taking place in the school. And that wasn't the right way or the right approach. That's very unprofessional. And sometimes they use the same student, to talk about their particular behavior or whatever was happening in the classroom, and you just don't do that. So I think that, for example, in the district that I was working at, we've come a long way with that. Now, they're hiring interpreters, they're hiring people to translate the documents correctly. So that's very important, and we need to be able to advocate in that sense that you should never use children when it comes to interpreting, especially at the IEP meetings and special 504 meetings. Okay, I agree. Nancy says, I agree. It happens all the time at doctors offices and other schools. Yes. And then Anna says, yes, here are some translated fact sheets for families about child interpreters. So yes, if you're interested in that, Anna just dropped a link in the chat about not using children as interpreters. Okay, so now we're moving on to the IAPs, 504 plans, and the family-centered advocacy. Okay, so what is an IEP according to the United States Department of Education? It is defined as each public school child who receives special education and related services must have an individualized education program plan known as an IEP. And then each IEP must be designed for one student and must be on a truly individualized document. The IEP creates an opportunity for teachers, parents, school administrators, related services personnel, and students, when appropriate, to work together to improve the educational results of the children with disabilities. Okay, so a well-written IEP is the cornerstone of a quality education for each child with a disability. So I don't know how many of you have sat in on an IEP meeting, but it can be very rigorous. And again, this is when you do not use a child for interpreting purposes because of the terminology, first of all, and also because of just the different things that are going to be spoken about the child that should continue to remain just private, right? It's confidential information. So really, it's important that somebody that is professional and understands the terminology be the person to interpret for the parents and for the educators on this end. Before that, we do have some comments here. Maria Jose says, and not just for confidentiality issues or how trusting the translated info is, but also because it is patronizing for the parent and family members. Correct, yes. And then Eva says, yes, IEPs here every day, every day. When I finished out at the school system, that's what I was doing. I was traveling from school to school almost every day, sitting in on IEPs for the parents. And again, it wasn't just about interpreting what was on that IEP plan, but it was also kind of explaining to the family what they were there for. Many times they didn't even understand why they were there. So it was kind of like starting out with explaining to them what the purpose of this was to them and why, and the rights that they had as parents to, maybe changing that IEP later on 2 or 3 months down the road. It was a lot of information for them to receive all in one sitting. But what I found was when it was like the first time that the parents were dealing with that, it could be a little bit overwhelming for them. But once they got the gist and understood how positive this could be for their child, when they came in the following year for the next IEP plan, it was much easier. It was, it was kind of like they understood the process, and then they would come with questions and concerns versus the first time when they didn't even know how, why they were there. But then, as the time went along and the years went along and they saw the progress of their child, it did get much, much better. So again, now we're going to talk about the 504 plan. What is that according to the U.S. Department of Education? Well, an individualized accommodation plan, Section 504 plan, is a document that outlines the specific accommodations and services a student with a disability needs to ensure equal access to education in a general education setting. That's kind of what Lauren touched upon earlier. And it ensures that students with disabilities can participate in programs and activities receiving federal funding, such as public schools. So, when you are interpreting at an IEP meeting or a 504 plan process meeting, your responsibilities are, preparing the families for these meetings, kind of, again, giving them a general, general knowledge or of why they're there. Also, interpreting with accuracy and cultural sensitivity. Again, I know that I don't need to say this because you're all already doing this, but that's very important. Avoiding oversimplification and checking for understanding. Again, the terminology sometimes can be very, very overwhelming and just different. You know, a lot of times these parents have never heard these words. Even if you interpret them into their native language, they don't understand. So sometimes you do have to what we would say, water it down a little bit or explain it in a different way. But the important thing here is that they walk away understanding why they were there, what paperwork they are signing, because it is their child. It is, you know, this is important information that they need to know what they're signing for and what kind of services their child is going to receive. Again, they can also say, no, I don't want my child to receive this. You know, so it's important that they understand why they are there and what they are signing. And then also supporting parent advocacy while remaining neutral. You know, the parents need to know that they can stand up for their children and for the needs of their children. So again, it's very important. Like that's why I say your work is very, very valuable and needed, because these parents, if they don't show up for these meetings, you know, they're doing their child a disservice many times. But again, sometimes they don't understand that they have that ability to be there and stand up for their children. Okay. Elena says, the use of abbreviations is very common and it can be very confusing. Yes. For example, in Spanish, we don't use a lot of abbreviations. The words are spoken out, right? And in English, it's IEP, 504, you know, in special ed, you know, they don't even say special education. So it's a lot of, that's why the responsibility of, you know, interpreting correctly. And sometimes you're just going to have to continue, you know, spell out the whole, what an IEP is and not say IEP, right? If you're, if you're interpreting in Spanish, it's about just something you're just having to do, you know, so that you can relay it correctly. So an overview of IEPs and IAPs and 504 plans, understanding the key differences and purposes. IEPs and 504s, IEPs are going to probably be more demanding and just an IEP, like, for example, not only one teacher gets it. If a child has 4 teachers throughout the year, each teacher is going to get that IEP plan because they're going to have to accommodate that child in all the different realms of the, you know, of his education. For example, some IEPs are very, very intense and just have a lot of information depending on the disability. And then some IEPs are very, very simple. So it all depends on the child, what grade level they're in, the needs that they need. And then in this case, you're adding an extra level because there's probably going to be a language challenge, right? Because they're learning English. So not only are you dealing with the other things, now you're also dealing with the language issue. So IEPs can be a little more intense and a little more complicated and just much bigger than the 504 plans. 504 plans are going to be a little, those are just going to be like, I hate to say simple because every child is different, but the accommodations are not going to be as difficult
In-depth.
and in depth, right? Thank you. In depth as an IEP. Okay. So the importance of family voice in the decision-making process. Again, I've already mentioned that it's very important that the parents have a voice and can discuss and ask questions. And that's something that I would always do before going into an IEP meeting with my parents. I would tell them, please feel free to ask any questions. No questions are dumb questions. You need to just speak up and express your concerns and have them addressed at this meeting. This is your child you are, you know, advocating for. And And then when they would go into the meeting, they already knew that they had that opportunity to ask questions. And then also during the whole time I was interpreting, I would say, do you have any questions? Do you understand? Do I have to repeat it again? And that way they would, before moving on to the next section of the IEP, I would always want to make sure that they had grasped what we had just talked about. Okay, and then again, just letting them know they have legal right to language access, meaning that they should never go into an IEP meeting if they don't have an interpreter with them, even though they might have some kind of ability with the English language, or if they want to feel more comfortable and hear it from somebody in their native language, they have a right to that language access. And then this is just a quote from Family-Centered Advocacy, according to Berlinghoff and McLaughlin. Emphasis on families, especially as decision makers and partners in supporting children's development and learning and strengthening family capacity, and in recognition and respect for diversity as represented by the cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic conditions of families, staff, and programs. That's what it is. So ensuring the accommodations reach home and school. We have translating plans into accessible family terms, clarifying roles and follow-up expectations, and equipping families with the questions to ask educators. Again, this is kind of an overview of what we've already talked about. It's important that you, as an interpreter or translator, you let them know, let the parents know, what the expectations are, and that you are equipping them with the ability to ask questions, for the educators that they're going to be encountering at these different meetings. So now we're moving on. Do we have any questions or chat? Let's see. Nancy says parents and guardians oftentimes do not know what to ask. At times I help and give examples. Thank you, Nancy. That is so important. Yes. Again, because they're not used to these kind of programs in their native countries, when they come here and they encounter this, because maybe their child has a problem, they could be hard of hearing, for example, right? So now they have an IEP plan because they need these accommodations in the classroom, or they need to be taught in a different style or different manner. They may even have, they may need to learn, for example, American Sign Language or something like that. So these are things that they're, dealing with. Not only it's a new country, it's a new language. They're assimilating to different traditions because, they're in a new setting. And also now possibly they just were told that their child has been diagnosed with a disability. Maybe it's something that they just encountered. So all of this could be a little traumatizing, and they don't even know where to begin. So you, as an interpreter, again, Nancy, what you are doing is awesome by helping them and giving them examples of how they can begin to advocate for their child and ask the correct questions in an IEP and 504 meeting.
This is me.
Okay. And then Nancy, oh, okay. Let's see. My namesake, Brenda Lee, says, can you add or drop the stated quotes in our chat about family advocacy? Okay. And then Nancy says, yes, I work at a deaf and blind institute, so multiple languages, big challenges here for parents. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. But thank you, Nancy. Thank you. All I can say is patience. And, I'm sure that right before you go into your interpreting gig, like we say, you have prepared and you know what who the family is or who the child is, so you know how to help them out. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Lauren again, and she's going to be talking about building strong homeschool partnerships.
All righty. Thank you so much, Brenda. That was fabulous. Anna said that they will be sharing a link to this recording along with your certificate of attendance. And for Miss Brenda, we will send those quotes to them to send out in those emails as well, so you'll have access to them. So a little bit about building strong homeschool partnerships. Best practices for collaborating with educators and special education teams. So, as an interpreter or translator, it's important that we are an essential piece, I'm sorry, of that educator family collaboration, because we are that, that gap, bridging that gap between the educator and the family. And this matters because there's power and partnership. A lot of the times, the school does not look at families as equal partners, right? But they are equal partners. They matter. They are who these children are going home to, who they're with on the weekends. And what is done at home is just as important as what they're learning in the schools. And so you guys play an essential and a crucial part of that partnership. Communication styles, trust building, family engagement tips all build trust with multilingual families. So, it's okay to be a little personable. I know that there are, some rules and ethics that, we all have to follow, but being personable, being welcoming, right? Because this is already a scary and overwhelming experience, especially for these families who have never dealt with the education system here before. And like she said earlier, like it's intimidating to them because the education system back home has a different set of norms, right? And so, being welcoming, being personable can go a long way with helping these families to feel more comfortable in these environments. Consistency, sharing context, follow-up questions are best practices for working with educators, right? Let the educators get to know who you are. The educators to be comfortable with you, right? You are not opposing them. You are not against them. We are neutral forces. We are not on team family. We are not on team educator. We are on team student, right? We're trying to get the best um, help and assistance that the student needs to equip them for the best opportunities that they can have. And so getting relationships with these educators, explaining your role to these educators, right? Like sometimes I know, I walked into an IEP meeting as a social worker and we had translators. And in the beginning, when I first started, I didn't know their role. I didn't know that, they translate exactly what you say, right? Like for all I know, you could be paraphrasing. And so explaining what your role is and what the rules are and the logistics of how this works can go a long way with comforting those educators as well. Um, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, provides professional codes of conduct. Boundaries reflect confidentiality and ethics. So, making sure that we are familiar with FERPA and those different policies that affect us, affect educators, affect families, and affect students in regards to the IEP and 504 plans, making sure that we keep up to date with our professional codes of conduct and what that looks like, and that our boundaries reflect confidentiality and ethics. And this helps with consistency, right? So if all of our professional codes of conduct and our boundaries are the same, then I'm not expecting more out of one interpreter than another. If I have two different interpreters for two different meetings, I know what to expect because the boundaries are clear, the codes of conduct are clear, and the confidentiality is clear across all of the interpreters and translators that I'm working with, right? So in continuation of that, having pre-meeting briefings. What is this meeting going to look like, right? What can we expect from both the family side and the educator side? What can we expect from this meeting? So I'm not going into this meeting blind, right? We can imagine as a family, especially a family who's coming from maybe an environment where schools do have power and it is intimidating, and I'm walking into a room with like 6 or 7 different people, educators, speech pathologists, social workers, whoever might be in that room, and I have no clue what I'm getting myself into. I'm going to be terrified, right? And so making sure that we prepare them for what to expect in these meetings, as well as the educators, right? Like preparing educators for what to expect, you know, in advocating and saying, this might be the reason why they are a little intimidated. Like maybe they came from this country, this is the norm in this country, and giving the educators context to know where the families are coming from. Glossaries, back to the terminology, making sure that everybody understands the terminology on the same level, right? We want to make sure, especially with families, that they understand what they are signing, what they are agreeing to. We want them to have just as much power and advocacy and capacity as our families who speak the same language as the educators. We want them to have the same voice. We want them to be just as heard as a family who can come in and speak one-on-one with the educator, right? So making sure they understand that. Note systems are strategies for effective team communication. So making sure we're all working as a team, understanding the broader context. So kind of a little bit I mentioned in the pre-meeting briefings, immigration, poverty, trauma is an inclusive practice. Make sure that these educators, administrators, whoever's included in these team meetings are aware of, to the best of our abilities. I know there is some confidentiality, but are aware of the circumstances in which these families are bringing into these meetings. There might be certain things that can be triggering for them that we might need to make sure um, i- prior to these meetings we're letting people know so that we're not triggering these families or scaring these families even more than they probably already are. Interpreting glossaries, online resources, legal rights, and tools and resources for support. So making sure that families understand the glossaries, they understand the resources that are available to them and the legal rights that they have, and making sure that those are interpreted for them. Your role matters. You guys serve as a bridge between the staff and families. You are the voice that for these families who otherwise would not have a voice, right? Who otherwise may have to, be kind of dehumanized by having their children interpret for them in what should be an adult meeting, right? You guys are giving these families capacity, you're giving them power, and you're giving them a voice that is so important. You communicate educational terms with clarity, terms that otherwise would probably be very confusing and would be very overwhelming. I imagine in our day-to-day lives, we go to start a task and it gets overwhelming. We're likely not going to finish that task. We're gonna be like, never mind, right? And so, in the same sense, we're walking into a meeting and the terms are overwhelming. I'll be like, never mind, just kidding. I don't want anything to do with this. And so, you're helping to lessen the chance of that. And you advocate for inclusive communication practices. Everyone should have a right to be heard, and everyone should have a right to advocate for their children. So, engaging and empowering multilingual families. You guys can assist with strategizing for building relationships and trust. You can be that person that they trust, that person that they form a relationship with, professional relationship, of course, but form a relationship with where they're comfortable in rooms they otherwise would not be comfortable in. Encouraging family input and participation in meetings, like Brenda said earlier. Do you have any questions? Are you sure that you're clear in this before we move forward, right? Giving them opportunities. They might not know to ask for clarity. They might not know that it's okay to say, "Hey, I'm confused. Can we pause here?" And so making sure that they are aware that they have those rights, and hosting culturally responsive events and orientations, right? Making sure that we are equipping and educating not just the families we work with, but the environments that they're going into, right? And making it a more welcoming environment, and making sure our educators and administrators are culturally responsive on the day to day, because we might not be there every single day or every single minute, depending on, what school systems we're working in. We might only be there for the big important meetings, but it's important for them to feel welcome every day. And so we can be that voice for them and advocate for those needs. So some key takeaways from today: language access is family engagement. Interpreters and translators empower families, and strong communication builds stronger outcomes for students. So we're all on the same side here, which is better student outcomes, um, bridging gaps between families and educators, and empowering everyone who has a role in this. So if you were in our presentation last time, this is going to be repetitive for you, but it's only 2 slides, so bear with us. But we felt like this applied today as
And
well.
the
This is
professor the trust with the comments by reminding them and assure through
okay. I wasn't sure if that was a question or not. So if you were with us last time, like I said, bear with us. We took this from our presentation on cultural considerations and mental health, and helping families through the climate that we are finding ourselves in today. But we felt like it was applicable to this as well, and so we wanted to provide those of you who were not here last time with this information. So this is tips for helping families to feel heard and safe. So we always want to maintain confidentiality, building trust with families by reminding them that everything that they share stays private. Lots of families nowadays are scared to give out information because of the climate that we're living in. And so they are way more hesitant now than maybe they have been in the past. And so making sure that they know that you are a safe space. Using a calm, respectful tone, speaking gently and clearly to help families feel calmer, being culturally sensitive, learning about a family's culture so you don't say or do anything that might feel disrespectful or confusing. And I think an important thing to note here is never to assume that because maybe we speak the same language, that we have the same cultural backgrounds or cultural practices, right? We can share some things without sharing everything. So never assume those things about the family. Ask them. Even if you guys do share it, it makes them feel heard that you're asking in those questions and that you're not just assuming, right? Advocate when appropriate. If something is being misunderstood or could cause harm, speak up to clarify or ask for better support. In IEP meetings, this might look like a parent is not understanding what is happening, right? And so we're going to work together to find a way to make sure that the parent is understanding and advocating for that. Staying neutral but compassionate. It's not our job to take sides, but we always want to show kindness and empathy in our voice and our body language. Stay informed and aware. Keep learning about current events and policies so you could better understand what families may be afraid of. That goes back to what I was just saying. A lot of families are scared to put any information on paper nowadays. An IEP is a big stack of paper with all their information on it. And so that can be really scary for them. And so staying aware of those things so that you can inform families, and you can inform them accurately, because these things are changing a lot and quickly, right? Keeping families informed, make sure that families are aware of their rights and continuously inform them about any changes. So what is their rights as of now in the school system, and their rights for an IEP and their rights for a 504 if their children should need that, letting them know about their rights. And then if things do change, making sure they're aware of those changes. Be patient and open. If families are emotional or confused, give them space and take time to make sure they feel heard. There's a lot going on right now that is confusing and that is scary for families. And so we want to be a safe space for them. We don't want to be another bully, right? And so making sure that we're patient and open with them. So fairness does not mean everyone gets the same. Fairness means everyone gets what they need. And so so that's the difference between equal and equity, right? And so it's important that everyone gets what they need to succeed, and that might look different for everyone. So this is a really important and powerful quote. So a little reflection, and I see some things in the chat, which I'll read while you guys are thinking through this. What shared strategies or best practices can you integrate into your work? And were there any moments that made you reflect on maybe a past experience, translating or interpreting, and maybe look at it or view it differently? So I'm going to read the comments aloud while you guys reflect on this, and you can feel free to share this in the chat. This is important. However, freelance interpreters contractors are limited in helping families this way. Yes, absolutely. I know that there are some legal and professional boundaries that you have to uphold, and sometimes we have to get a little creative. We never want you to put your job in jeopardy or anything of that nature. So you know what your specific policies and procedures are. And I think Brenda has something to add as well. She's coming over to me.
In this case, what you could do is connect them to perhaps the school. If the school has a family engagement specialist, connect them to them so that then parents can be more involved with the school. Also, sometimes they have a team of interpreters or translators already, or even someone in the school office, for example, that may speak Spanish or whatever their language is, connect the family to them so that at least they know that there's somebody at the school that they can reach out to and then become slowly, more and more involved. So if you cannot, as a freelancer or contractor, get involved with the family engagement aspect of it, connect them to someone at the school, and then, you've done your job.
Yeah. And so Anna dropped in the chat the session review. It says, please complete our session evaluation and let us know topics that you'd like to see in the future. Definitely, that is so important because we were trying to plan some more presentations. So we want to know what you guys want to hear and what's important to you guys in the work that you are doing every day. Eva said, I agree with Elena. Even when you work for the school district, each district works differently. When a teacher or other school staff starts using too many acronyms, abbreviations, and the like, we have to go back to the educator and our professional and ask them to explain. Interpreters do not always explain, even when we know what all of those mean. Absolutely. Yvonne said we are mandatory reporters and shared something about mandatory reporters. And Anna said, as a freelancer school-based interpreter, you can also use your pre-session to ask educators to avoid using acronyms or abbreviations. Thank you so much, Anna. That's a great point. Sometimes when I interpret, I say something like, the interpreter would like to ask you to spell out and do this every time I hear an abbreviation. Thank you, Anna. That's a great tip. So to respect everyone's time, if you would like to scan our QR code or go to our website, lasfec.org, you can get more information. We also have a variety of free resources that are already translated into the, I want to say, 5 most prominent languages here in our state of Louisiana, which includes Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, Chinese, and French, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. I think so. But we have, yes, I said Arabic. We have resources that are already interpreted on our website. And if there's anything that you guys can think of that you think would be a need, you guys are working in these populations on the day-to-day basis, let us know. We are so open to creating new resources, and then we will get them translated for you, save you a little bit of work. So that is our website. We also ask that you complete our post survey. It's really helpful to us in improving our content and making sure that we are giving presentations that are helpful. We don't want to waste anyone's time. So that's a little bit about that, and we will also send that to Anna to send out in the follow-up email so you have the survey as well. But please do fill out the survey. It is very, very helpful for us. And lastly, we are skipping the month of July, but we will be back in August, on August the 6th, I believe we have it pulled up.
I guess I should know that, right?
Yes. So we will be, oh, there's 2 of me now. Hold on, let me turn. So our next session is on helping multilingual families understand federal and local education laws. The reason why we decided to do that one in August and do it last was so that we can have the most up-to-date information with everything that has been changing so quickly. And so we will give that information in the most current information in August. We do have a couple of people on our team that have that background, that legal background, and know a lot about laws and things of that nature. And so we will partner with them to get you guys the most current and recent information at that time. It'll be on August 6th at the same time as it was today. And Anna will give you guys information, I don't know about today or later on how to register for that. So thank you guys so much to respect everyone's time. And it's right on time, 1 o'clock. I will let you guys go. If anyone has any questions, we will stay back for a few minutes and answer questions. But you do not have to stay for that if you are ready to go. So thank you guys so much for your participation today. We very much appreciate it, and we'll stay on for a few more minutes to answer questions.
Thank you, Lauren and Brenda, so much again and I love this going back and forth. It's very strange, but I love it. It's
We never
working.
do this. If you've been in our
No,
previous,
but
we're
it's just-
normally in different places.
It's
but
very interesting. And I also love how you stated that, we left the legislation presentation for later because, lots of things are changing and we just need to wait a little longer. So that's why. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm hoping that if you do have any questions that you feel free to unmute yourselves, we can stop the recording and you can speak freely if that's better. But I really love the participation on the chat and all these things that have come up. As you know, for us, for Natiso, this is an area that we're passionate about. We really believe that interpreters are essential in this work and that we promote equity and communication. And we really do that in so many different ways. So your work is essential. So we want to give people a few minutes to ask questions. Feel free to write it on the chat. I'm going to stop the recording so you can ask your questions freely. But feel free to unmute yourselves if you have anything to comment. So
And just a sidebar, if you have any questions, our emails are lauren@mycll.org and